Okay, good morning to everyone. This homily has 4 parts, really. There's a very brief introduction, like a preface to the homily, and then the second part, it's about this villain, the man that Jesus describes in the parable. So that's the lion's share of the homily. I'm going to talk about him. The third part of the homily, I'm going to mention St. Paul's letter to the Colossians. That was from the second reading. And then I'm going to try and bring it all together, summarizing what I said in the brief 4th part of the homily. Okay, so that's the roadmap. Stay with me all the way to the end. This is, I would say, a medium-length homily, okay? But you be the judge. You tell me, okay? So here's the preface. I want to begin with a cautionary tale. This is a true story. My cousin had a neighbor who won the lottery, and it was a tragedy. His sudden wealth became the centerpiece of all of his relationships. It was like this mental illness. He became suspicious of everyone. He stopped talking to people. He lost all of his friends. He essentially built this imaginary wall around himself, keeping others away. He was so focused on his wealth. He was so focused on preserving his millions that he actually lost everything. Moving on to the next part of the homily. The rich man in the parable. Bountiful harvest, abundant grain. He's building bigger and bigger barns. He's an example for us not to follow. Why? Because he is materialistic and hedonistic and narcissistic. Okay, say materialistic because that is what he values the most. His wealth, his harvest, that's what's most important to him. He's hedonistic because he's seeking pleasure. Eat, drink, be merry. So food and drink, that's what gives him the most satisfaction. And then narcissistic. It's because he's so focused on himself, completely self-referential. By the way, can you pick up on Jesus' humor? As you're listening to this parable, it's meant to be kind of funny. It says, he asked himself, "What shall I do?" He said, "This is what I shall do. Then I shall say to myself, now as for you, you have so many good things." So we hear a lot of I and myself. This man lives in a world with a population of 1. Our religion proposes an entirely different way of life. Okay, Christians, you and I, we're not materialistic. Do you know why? Because our greatest values are spiritual. I'm talking about we value a person's character, their virtue, how they follow God's commandments. What do we stress? Forgiveness. This immaterial value of mercy. We promote in the church truth and beauty. We are obsessed with all things that are lovely in God's eyes. This is the stuff of a healthy soul, and this is what brings meaning to our lives, not material wealth. You know what, Christians? We're not hedonistic. Our goal is not simply to incite dopamine in our brains. Food and drink and sex are all good, but within the correct context and with self-control. That's why I only go to Chipotle 1 time every day. Do you see? We know the value of discipline and fasting and sacrifice. Think about our season of Lent. We prefer to indulge our soul rather than our body. We indulge our soul with things like silence and prayer. And then, fellow Christians, we're not narcissistic because we're people of service and community. Our life has to be rooted in relationships and in friendships. We're good at empathy, listening to others. You hear me say this all the time. We have been blessed by a good God, which means we can be a blessing to others. The very simple, ancient recipe for happiness in the Christian tradition: put God first, and then others, and yourself last. Okay, that's the second part of the homily. It's done. Let me move into the third part of the homily. It's from St. Paul's letter to the Colossians, the second reading. He's saying a lot of the same things, but he formulates it differently. Listen to these words from St. Paul. Put to death, then, the parts of you that are earthly: immorality, impurity, passion, evil desire, and the greed that is idolatry. You have taken off the old self with its practices and have put on the new self. Okay, fellow Christians, fellow sinners, this is our struggle. It's difficult, yes, I know, to shed the old self and to put on this new life that Christ proposes, that Christ offers. You know why? That sinful part of us, we tend to nurture and defend that old self, the worldly self. I say the worldly self because in our world, those are the promises of happiness if we have the right things. That's materialism. There's a promise that we hear of happiness if we find the right distraction. That's hedonism. There's happiness if we focus solely on our own pursuits and desires. That's narcissism. Our lives are not conformed to the promises of the world. Our lives are conformed to the priorities of the kingdom of God, so that we can experience authentic joy. Maybe I can end this fourth part of the homily. I want you to imagine Jesus standing here in front of us, inviting you to eat, drink, and be merry. He says that in all truth because that is a Eucharistic expression. Eat, drink, and be merry. That captures our belief, our devotion to the Eucharist. Around this altar is where we receive God's grace in the Blessed Sacrament, the grace to overcome the temptations to materialism and hedonism and narcissism, all those things that lead to spiritual death. Here's the irony of this all. Jesus, he is like the rich man in the parable, whose barns are overflowing, but his grain is not for himself. Jesus is the grain, and his wealth is his love, because he gives us his very body and blood in the form of bread and wine. And we receive this sacred meal in community, in a family, in a parish, in the church. In other words, all those imaginary walls that we build up around ourselves, they come tumbling down at every single Mass. We find joy in our participation in the Eucharist. We won the lottery because we're here at Mass.